Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this on my channels. As many of you have asked, what it takes to get into data science field, and you have many questions. So I have brought a data scientist today to share, Vivek. So Vivek, I met Abhishek. Sorry, Abhishek. So I met Abhishek at ML Ops meeting, and after I learned about his background, so it was very interesting. So I wanted to ask a few questions to him, and also share his insights and his story on how he got into data science field, and what it takes to get into data science field, and what kind of suggestion he can give you guys to find your first data scientist job. So let's get started. So before we started, so I want to ask Vivek to give some short background about his professional background and how you got into data science field, what got you excited, right? And what are the different challenges you had when you try to get into data science field. So go ahead, Abhishek.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, first of all, thanks for having me over here and providing me this opportunity to have this interaction. So, hi everyone, I am Abhishek Patria. I'm currently a senior data scientist. I'm working at Invesco. So just to get into how I got into this field, I did my bachelor's in chemical engineering, and I was working for an oil and gas company back in India. So I was doing a lot of simulation work that involved fluid dynamics, heat transfer, transport phenomena for a reservoir engineering purpose. So in that, I had to prepare data sets, then at the same time build some of the models, do some of history matching, and perform some form of error analysis. So that's how I sort of got introduced to this whole data science field. Technically, it was not called data science probably back then when I was doing this, but I was doing the work that generally what we do in data science. So unknowingly, I was doing the same thing.
So what it sounds like, so you didn't actually came from the data science or computer science background, right? So a lot of people have questions about, do I need to have a computer science background or programming background to be in the data science field? So so it seems like what do you answer to that? You don't need to have, sounds like.
Yeah, so as long as data science is considered, it's always good to have a computer science background, because you come up with a good amount of skills that you can just transcribe onto data science. But if you're looking, even if you're in a different field, I think having a sense of data is much more important than being in computer science. So I think that's probably the primary requirement, and one being much more inquisitive in terms of looking at data.
Yeah, interesting. So what technical skill or programming language do you consider essential for a data science role, or to get into the data science role? Like when you first started, when you were trying to get into data science fields, what are the different programming skill or technical skill you primarily focus on?
Sure. So I think one of the primary skill to have is to basically learn the language of data. And probably this could be a bit controversial for people, but I would say don't start with any programming language before. I would say just learn SQL to fetch data, because even if you start with anything, probably things that you will start with is a tabular form of data. You will have everything structured over there. And it's pretty important to use SQL for those sort of data retrieval and basic manipulations, because if you move into professional settings, you don't have the liberty of doing everything in a notebook sometimes, because the data sets are huge. Exactly. So not everything is
ready to use CSV files. So I tell that all the time. Like if there is no data, there is no data science, and you cannot have data without SQL knowledge.
Exactly. Totally to your point, Chris. So I think that's one of the primary skills to learn, and also just to know a bit of very basics of database, like how different types of databases there, what in what way you can access a NoSQL type of thing. Not to get into how those databases work, but probably just to know the difference for utility. So I think I'll probably advise anyone who want to get into data science to learn, first of all, this language of data. And this could be a bit more controversial again, but I think learn Python over R.
Yeah, absolutely. Python, I tell all the time.
Yeah. So R has its own uses. For example, if you are into a lot more statistical modeling and if you want to be statistically very accurate and all of that stuff, I would say use R for that. But learning Python would not just restrict you to data science. It will probably open much more avenues outside data science as well. Because I've seen a lot of my colleagues and friends who entered into data science, but they transitioned to something as machine learning engineering or even software because it interested them. So learning a language that is built for a generic purpose, not just for data analysis, would be great. And I would say Python would be a very good starting point for that, because you'll not just get to learn your data manipulation or classical modeling libraries such as pandas or scikit. You can delve into deep learning, or you can just create a system out of your own if you are well versed with some of the object oriented concepts.
Right. So to learn SQL, right? A lot of people ask, which SQL should I learn? Basically, SQL, most of the SQL have similar syntax, but there are some like Snowflake SQL, Oracle, Redshift, and also there's a Postgres. Which one do you recommend to learn for the current one that is like upcoming and current and must used by many companies?
Sure. So I personally think learning Postgres syntax would be beneficial because Postgres is more of an industry standard, and a lot of other companies, or I don't know, for top wrappers are there available for Snowflake and other type of systems. So everyone is using a derivative of SQL. It's not that different. Maybe the date function could be differently named, or it's just it could be some very specific function that is proprietary to Snowflake, and that's how they are using it. More or less is gonna be so the same. But if you are talking about a starting point, I would say start with Postgres, because a lot of legacy systems still use that syntax and still use the keywords being used in that. Additionally, even now, if you are working in a professional setting, more or less you will get to see Postgres more than other form of SQL.
Great. So how do you approach creating or maintaining a strong portfolio? Let's say like you're trying to find a data science job, right? What kind of project they should work on, and where can they show their project or put their project where they can show it to your hiring manager?
Right. So building a portfolio is super important if you're starting into any field. And for data science, it becomes even more important because the skill set is huge. It's like you can go into different directions. So the first thing you will need to have is to where to host your portfolio, right? So I would say you can start with GitHub, because it's free for personal use, and you can upload both your code and some of the markdown form of documentation over there. So it becomes a good way for any maybe recruiter or any third person to go through your code, and it gives that verification that it was you basically who committed that code in your repository. And it also shows that maybe you have some form of those Git skills that are required. So
Right.
that's very important in that front. And if you're talking about some form of like a presentation sort of thing, maybe how to present your work better. So you can attach your project page on the GitHub itself. So every repository that you have in a GitHub, you can start creating small project pages, and that could in turn become sort of website for yourself that you can display to other people, or you can share the URL itself.
Right. But let's say they want to go and find the project, right? So where should they go and find the project? And should people be focused towards their domain, or they should just go and randomly find any project to apply for data science job?
Right. So that's a great question. So for anyone who is starting on data science, I would say try finding something related to your domain, because you will save a lot of trouble in terms of understanding the data and then start to work on that problem. But even if some data sets are not available for your own domain to start with, there are plenty of free data sets available. You can go to Kaggle, they have a lot of previous competitions and everything. But maybe a good starting point is sticking to domain in which you're working right now.
Yeah, that's what I tell a lot of my mentees or students too. So because you already have accomplished your, I don't know, like 60-70% of the requirement by just being expert in that domain. And now all you need is the technical knowledge, which is it takes less time to have this domain knowledge, because domain comes from years of experience, right?
Absolutely. And just to add on your point, Chris, so these, like you said, these technical skills are pretty like easy to grasp when you are doing them repeatedly. But just understanding that data can set you off in terms of starting with data science. So maybe sticking to your domain solves a lot of that issues.
Absolutely. Like we spend almost 70 to 80% of the time just understanding the business problem and gathering the data and doing all those exploratory analysis. So all the machine learnings and deployment, all those things comes later on, right? So those are all technical skills, but you cannot do all those things until you have the basic actually master. So fantastic, fantastic. Can you explain us like how like end-to-end process on like when you work on a daily basis, getting data to building model to deploying, like how does the whole cycle work so that the people can actually do this similar work for their next coming interview, and so that as a project.
Yeah, so I can start with answering for working on the project itself. So when you're working on a project, I would say so there's pretty standard pipeline the way you would work. There's exploratory data analysis that you will be doing with whatever data you have. Then probably you'll be doing some form of feature engineering, maybe some data sampling, balancing, and then building out your model. And then most important thing in this whole thing is to do error analysis at the end, because that's how you start developing your interpretation skills on the whole process. So once you have all of that, I would say start compiling a report sort of thing using Markdown. And once we have that, you'll start working on multiple projects to have that portfolio of yours, and maybe then you automatically start developing a lot of other skills, not just technical, but also I would say business interpretation, or sort of one of the popular term these days is called product sense. So that's very important to develop, and you can develop that by doing things. So it's pretty easy once you have done multiple projects to start developing that sense of data and start tying that to business. So in turn automatically all of this process prepares you in the interview process, like to answer any question that is asked for your project itself.
So where after they have built their model and done all the work, right, in their Jupyter Notebook or Visual Studio, whichever they're using, where should they deploy their model? Like how should they deploy their model so that they can tell the hiring manager that I have done the end-to-end project, starting from scratch all the way to building the model and putting out there so people can actually play with it?
Right. So that's a great question. So there are multiple approaches to that. So if you're just talking about a very static website that is just using your maybe project details, that's one way to do that. But let's say if we want to make some interactive system, I would say a very easy or a low hanging fruit is to use Streamlit. And the reason, because you can get any domain or you can go to any cloud provider, buy a very bare bones EC2 instance or anything, and then you can just simply use your Streamlit to host any application. So you don't have to do a lot of server side of work. So it's good. First of all, it's good for presentation. Secondly, it's basically using an actively developed ML model in the background to do some interaction on the web page. So I would say try to learn Streamlit a bit. It is pretty easy, or you don't have to delve deep into web development processes and all of that. And it gives you both the presentation aspect, and then you can stitch in your model to that presentation.
Yeah, so you mentioned that during our meeting as well. So Streamlit, so what are you all using Streamlit for in your company currently?
So basically, like Streamlit is primarily used for presentation purpose. So once you have your models and everything, it's a very good tool to provide a nice summary to your project, and it also can replace the whole presentation or the PowerPoint sort of thing.
Right.
So it becomes a good tool to give presentations, I would say, where you can actively see what's going on with your model while you are presenting something.
So you can actually deploy your machine learning work in the form of Streamlit web app, sounds like, right?
Exactly.
Fantastic. So those are all technical skills. So let's get into soft skills, right? So people are also worried about like what are the different soft skills that I need to improve on? Because many times you can be you can be a really good coder, but if you can't sell your skill or talk like a data scientist, then it's a challenge, right? So you just won't be able to get the job. So what kind of advice do you give people about improving their communication skill and soft skill and presentation skills and all those things?
Sure. So, like you said, soft skills are one of the more important, I would say, aspect of a data scientist if you're working in a professional setting. Simply because a lot of times you do have to do expectation management on what you can achieve, what a model can do, and how much we can enrich the business with whatever work that we're trying to do. So, I would say start with making uh, or scratch that. I would say start with writing problem statements. So it's like one very common philosophy is basically like someone ask you to solve this problem using data science, right? And there's another skill to basically translate that problem statement into technical stuff. I'm not talking about coding or anything, but like maybe what data sets could be required, how will I approach that problem, what probable models would I be using, how would I do my error analysis. So translating them into small blocks and then again translating back them to business insights is, I think, one very important skill to develop. And I think that's probably the core aspect of data science in a lot of non-tech companies, I would say. Because if a company's main business is non-tech, they will be very much focused on what they want to achieve using data science rather practice data science in the firm.
Right.
So that's one thing to do. Then I would say work on your presentation skills as well. Simply because a lot of times when you're speaking to stakeholders, they don't have a lot of time to go through the technical aspects of what you have done, right?
Right.
And it becomes very much important to tell them a story about how was this data accumulated, what are some of the probably issues that you could that you could find with this data, and not talking about maybe how did you clean this data and everything, but probably potential issues such that maybe your data set doesn't receive X type of orders from Y type of customers, right?
Right.
So these are some of the issues that you can, these are some of the insights that you can derive from EDA, because that's probably where you can engage business stakeholders a lot into your project. And then finally, how is this performing and what value is it generating to the business? I think that's one very important skill to have, to first of all translate your whole business thing into cost perspective and what are the improvements that your work has offered to the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I see from a lot of people is they just build lots of bunch of model in their Jupyter notebook, and then they just do code, and they never actually put all their work into the PowerPoint presentations, right? So, and I even tell people, hey, don't get shy. Like when you're still learning. So my recommendations is like actually make videos, right? If you don't have people to do a presentation, create a really nice PowerPoint and then slide, and then create a video of yourself, and then watch it over again so you can actually learn from that. So I did that. I made a lot of videos when I was going to school, and those are the recommendations that professors suggested as well.
Right.
So yeah, fantastic. So what we're saying is like presentations and soft skill is very important, not just the technical skills, right? Like that's what gets you to the door. Like most of the interview that I have, like some interview they ask you to actually do the coding, right? But
Right.
most of them they actually don't actually do the coding. So in your experience, how often have you had to go through the technical coding interview versus no coding interview?
Sure. So I would say the companies that I have interviewed for data science, I have always been through, I would say, coding round, but it would depend on the company itself. So it could be
Right.
a take-home assignment or it could be a live coding round as well. And the thing is, like, there is so much. So the data science skill set is so huge that a lot of different types of people keep entering the field, leaving the field, right?
Right.
So there are some of the core skills that most of the companies have identified, which is like data skills that is basic that any company can test on SQL, right?
Right.
Then there are coding skills or like very bare bones coding skills that could be tested using any programming language of your choice. So I would say it's good to have that technical proficiency to basically clear these rounds. And the reason being, a lot of, I would say, famous companies would first of all screen the candidate based on these rounds, right? And probably then they would move on to the rounds where they actually want to see your data science or machine learning skills. So it's always a good idea to be proficient both in SQL and your programming language of your choice.
Perfect. Perfect. So yeah, let's switch gears. So in your experience, what are some common mistake or misconception that new job seeker in data science tend to make? Like some of the mistakes that you have made while you're trying to find a data science job.
Sure. So let me recollect. So couple of my mentees, basically, I have seen them preparing a lot on the theoretical side of machine learning or data science while going for an interview.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can pay off, but using like a thumb of rule sort of thing, most of the interviews, so it's always a good idea to know the perspective of how the interview is being taken. So most of the companies are seeking, if you have some of the good data skills, can you access the data that they have stored in their servers? Can you work on, do you have the basic requisite programming skills that you can use in order to manipulate all of that, right? So people tend to focus a lot more on theory than the practical aspects of it. I think that probably puts them in a backseat a lot of times, because I've seen people doing masters and all of that, basically having amazing knowledge about data science and machine learning and everything. But when it comes to practice, they still have to look a lot at documentation, or they would have to keep on doing that Google search repeatedly just to find the relevant commands. So I would say just keep practice hands-on on the theory part, or in parallel with the theory part, so that will help. That will provide you an edge over a lot of other candidates.
Fantastic. So is there any specific industry or sector that you believe are particularly promising for data scientists right now that they should focus on or work on this similar type of project?
Sure. So I think some of the sectors, where data science is going to be evergreen, probably, yeah, it's going to be hot all the time, I would say, is basically tech sector, right? Because of technology actively uses data to build systems. So that's one sector where they can easily look at, like, there's never going to be a dearth of jobs over there. Then I would say consumer-facing businesses, even which are non-tech. So let's say we are talking about, I don't know, CPG goods, or maybe finance or banking sector, right? So in wherever there's a lot more customer interaction, I would say somehow data is generated, and you can do data science only when you have data. So that's basically the precursor to doing data science, right? So you can easily start filtering companies you can see in that manner. So I would say CPG, finance, banking, tech is always there. So these are the industries that they require data scientists to work on. So yeah.
On that note, a lot of people also they're also asking that ChatGPT might take away your job in generative AI. What do you think about that? Do you think that those AI technique will take away data science job, or in the job in IT field, like data analysts, data engineers, and those type of work?
That's an amazing question, and I do get this question a lot these days. So my take on this is LLMs cannot yet overtake on the creative side of doing things. So be it data science, data engineering, or computer science, or like software side, right? So if you're talking about doing some feature engineering or trying to come up with creative features out of the data set, or let's say you're trying to build a scalable system for machine learning deployment, or let's say you are building some very obscure data pipelines from sources that nobody has ever heard of and trying to stitch them all together, right? So these are the things that probably an LLM cannot do yet. maybe it still is not going to be able to do maybe next 5-10 years, I would say. And I would say 5 years is a good amount of duration to stick to a field because things are changing way more quickly these days. So as long as you are on the creative side of these things, probably you're secure. You're not affected by
There is
cheating.
always going to be need for a human decisions, right? I mean, human has to
Exactly.
make the final decisions, not like a computer. They will only do what we tell computer to do, basically. So that's what I tell people too. So we're almost out of time. But how do you keep up with all these new technologies that's coming up, new libraries, new software skill that's coming up every day? It's like, how do you keep up with all those things?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so this basically brings back to our original question. Just learn one language very in a very detailed manner.
Uh-huh.
For example, let's take Python for example,
Python,
right?
yeah.
So if you know how you can create classes with that, you probably are familiar with object-oriented stuff. If you know how to use other data manipulation stuff, probably it will be easy for you to switch to R. And if you know how to build systems or do some form of web-based like web development or maybe backend sort of development with this language, you can easily transcribe the same skill set to some another language, right? So maybe sticking to one language and basically learning that very well easily can help you learn a new system very quickly because a lot of newer stuff is coming up in Python only. So if you know the intricacies of that language, you can just start reading up the source code and you can be very well at it in no time.
Yeah, that's what I think too. So yeah, almost there. So how do you stay? No, sorry. When preparing for an interview, right? How do you recommend showing your problem solving and analytical skills to the hiring manager?
Yeah, so problem solving is, I would say, just talk to the hiring manager. Basically, just keep on talking on whatever you are thinking. Obviously, not everything, but yeah, basically talk your interview through the hiring manager or the interviewers taking your interview. So in that case, they know what is your thought process, how you're thinking, and you can keep asking feedback at some point of time during the interview, like if you're in the right path, is it what they were asking some clarifying questions. So this automatically improves this whole process that you're sort of now showing how you're thinking and the way that you're taking to reach the final answer. So that
Right,
helps.
absolutely. So sometimes I just tell people too, it's like speak with confidence. Like if you start showing nervousness, they'll just say like, oh, this guy is not doesn't know what he's talking about. But
Right.
all those jobs, they're looking for 10, 15 years of experience, right? But data science field is only like 10 years old. I think it's not that rule. So the hiring manager knows, right? So that you don't have like 10, 20 years of experience, but what they're looking for is the confidence and can you do the job? Do you have these skills,
Right.
right? So yeah, we're almost to the time, but do you have any final suggestions, nuggets for people who's trying to get into data science field?
Sure. I would say just don't get overwhelmed by a lot of stuff that is going on. Just learn the basic principles very well, so you're able to switch to any newer model or new programming paradigm that is coming up these days. So just get your basics done very well. So that's probably what I would recommend.
What should they do? Should they apply for entry level job? Should they apply for a senior data scientist, or they should just apply for what is it called, internship?
Yes. So if you already have some background in data analytics or even maybe some in some way that you are using data right now, it's
Yeah,
easy.
yeah.
It will be much easier for you to shift into a data science job because all you'll probably need to learn is the model building exercise and some of the error analysis part. Same is the case with computer science folks as well. If you have done computer science, you already know a lot of technical skills. It's just
Right.
you need to get a brush on your stats and basically learn some of the machine learning part of this whole thing. But if you are in a field altogether different, I would say it'll depend what you bring onto the table. So if it is it is a technical level position, maybe you'll need to show those type of skills to apply for a position at an entry or even at a medium level. Or but if you do have a lot of business experience and then you're doing it in some form of digital transformation using data science, maybe the skill set that will be required is more on the domain knowledge side rather than on the data science side. So I would say it depends on the position that you are targeting. So
Absolutely. Like sometimes like this, you have to know your worth too. Like, just applying
right,
for entry level, because there's no such thing called entry level job, right? So I have a company and I'm not going to hire somebody entry level, because in my mind, I already know like, oh, I don't have time to do all this,
right.
things, right? So yeah, great, fantastic. So thanks a lot, Abhishek, for giving us some time and then sharing your stories to all the new folks who is trying to get into data science and machine learning field. So I hope you guys enjoyed our interview. And if you have any questions or comments, just feel free to like, comment, or subscribe the channel. And then maybe next time we'll bring another fantastic interview as well, and basically help you get into your data science field, or help you with your career, help you advance.